He had all the money in the world, but his only son had never taken a single step. Doctors gave up, specialists failed. But when a poor black maid entered their mansion, she unlocked a miracle no one could have imagined. Richard Caldwell was a man whose name carried power in every corner of the city. He was a millionaire, respected and envied, yet his mansion was the loneliest place on earth. Behind the towering gates, polished marble floors, and chandeliers worth more than some homes, there lived a boy whose heart longed not for riches but for freedom. Daniel, Richard's 10-year-old son, had never walked a single step since the day he was born. Doctors from across the world had been flown in, specialists with the most advanced treatments had examined him, yet each visit ended with the same crushing words: "He will never walk." Richard had written checks worth fortunes, invested in machines and therapies, but the results never came. Daniel spent his days staring out the tall windows of the mansion, watching other children run in the gardens, laughter echoing while his own world was silent. His mother, who once filled the home with warmth, had passed away years ago, leaving Richard and Daniel in a cold emptiness money could not cure. The boy's spirit had grown quiet, his laughter rare, his eyes tired. Richard would often stand by the doorway of his son's room at night, watching him sleep, wishing he could trade all his wealth just to see his boy take one step. The mansion, though full of treasures, felt like a prison for them both. It was in this heavy silence that Richard decided something had to change. He couldn't bear to see Daniel wither away in hopelessness. So he hired new help, searching not just for staff but for someone who could bring light into his son's life. And that was the day Rosa, a humble maid with kind eyes and a quiet strength, walked into the mansion, unaware that she was about to rewrite their story forever. Rosa entered the Caldwell mansion with humble steps, clutching her small bag and whispering a quiet prayer under her breath. She had worked in many wealthy homes before, but nothing compared to the sheer size and coldness of this place. The walls gleamed with expensive paintings, the air carried the faint scent of polish, and silence pressed down like a heavy blanket. Most new maids would have been in awe, but Rosa felt only a sadness she couldn't explain. On her very first day, she was told about young Daniel, the boy she would often care for. "He doesn't talk much, and he never leaves his chair," one of the older staff warned with a shake of her head. But Rosa's heart softened instantly. She asked permission to bring him his lunch, and when she entered his room, she saw him sitting by the window, his small face tilted toward the sunlight as if chasing a warmth he couldn't quite reach. His legs were still, wrapped in a soft blanket, and his hands held a toy violin with strings loose and broken. He didn't look up at first, but Rosa gently placed the tray beside him and smiled. "I made this sandwich just for you," she said, though it wasn't true. She hadn't made it, but her voice carried a warmth that made Daniel glance at her. For the first time in a long while, he saw not pity in someone's eyes but kindness. "I don't like sandwiches," he muttered, his voice faint but steady. Rosa chuckled softly. "That's fine. But maybe you'll like me sitting here while you eat something else." To everyone's surprise, Daniel didn't push her away. Instead, he let her stay, and in that quiet moment, a bond began. Fragile, but powerful enough to stir hope where none had existed before. The days slowly began to change after Rosa's arrival, though no one in the Caldwell mansion noticed at first. While the other staff hurried through their duties with stiff formality, Rosa lingered by Daniel's side, talking to him as if he were simply a boy and not a broken shadow of one. She would bring him books with colorful pictures, sometimes reading aloud in her gentle, rhythmic voice, and other times encouraging him to tell her what he saw in the illustrations. At first, Daniel barely responded, his words clipped, his eyes often distant, but Rosa was patient. She never rushed him, never treated his silence as a burden. One afternoon, as she dusted the windowsill, she noticed his eyes following her movements. "Do you like the sunlight, Daniel?" she asked softly. He shrugged, but when she smiled and drew the curtain wide open, the golden light spilling across the floor, she caught the faintest curve of his lips. Rosa knew then that beneath his guarded silence, a spark of life still glimmered. Determined, she began to weave playfulness into her care, singing little songs while folding laundry, telling funny stories about her own childhood, and pretending to forget where she placed his toy violin so that he would correct her. Slowly, Daniel began to laugh, quietly at first, then with more confidence, as though laughter was something his body had long forgotten but was relearning through her. Every smile, every giggle, felt like a miracle unfolding in slow motion. The other maids whispered that Rosa was wasting her time, but she ignored them. She saw something no one else dared to see. Daniel didn't need pity. He needed love, patience, and the courage of someone who believed in him. And Rosa had all three in abundance. One cool morning, Rosa entered Daniel's room with her usual warm smile, carrying a tray with fresh bread and a small glass of orange juice. She found him sitting by the window, staring out at the sprawling garden below. His eyes lingered on the children of visiting guests, running and chasing one another across the grass. Rosa placed the tray gently on the table and said softly, "Wouldn't you like to feel the wind on your face out there, Daniel?" He shook his head quickly, his voice trembling as he whispered, "I can't walk." Rosa didn't argue. Instead, she crouched down beside him and looked him straight in the eye. "Maybe not yet," she said, "but that doesn't mean you never will." That day, she introduced a new routine, tiny, careful stretches and movements, disguised as playful games. At first, Daniel resisted, convinced it was hopeless. But Rosa's patience and encouragement made it feel less like work and more like fun. She would clap and cheer every time he managed to lift his legs just an inch higher or hold his balance for a few more seconds. Slowly, his body responded, and for the first time, Daniel felt a flicker of strength he hadn't known was still inside him. One afternoon, Rosa placed his violin across the room and said with a grin, "Why don't you try to reach it?" His heart raced with fear, but her steady gaze gave him courage. He pushed himself from the chair, his legs trembling under his weight. Step by shaky step, Daniel inched forward until his hands finally grasped the instrument. Rosa clapped with tears in her eyes, whispering, "I told you, Daniel, you're stronger than you think." In that fragile, miraculous moment, the impossible no longer felt out of reach. The grand hall of the mansion was filled with soft candlelight, polished floors shining as the guests gathered for Mr. Harrington's annual charity gala. Musicians tuned their instruments, waiters carried trays of champagne, and whispers of wealth floated through the room. At the far end of the hall sat Daniel in his chair, his violin resting gently in his hands. He had always played seated, hidden in the corner where no one truly noticed him. But tonight was different. Rosa stood behind him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, her eyes silently urging him to be brave. As the room quieted, Daniel lifted his bow, his heart pounding in his chest. The first notes filled the air, sweet, trembling, then steady. The melody grew, pouring out like his soul had been waiting years to speak. Midway through the piece, Daniel closed his eyes, and with Rosa's whispered encouragement in his ear, "Trust yourself," he slowly rose to his feet. Gasps rippled through the hall as the boy who had never walked stood tall, his music soaring higher with each step he took forward. His legs shook, but his spirit carried him further than he ever thought possible. By the final note, he stood in the center of the hall, bow raised, tears streaming down his face. The audience erupted in thunderous applause, some standing with tears in their eyes, while Mr. Harrington sat frozen, humbled by the miracle unfolding before him. For the first time, Daniel felt not like a prisoner of his body, but like the master of his own destiny.
Rosa smiled through her tears, whispering softly, "You found your wings."
And with that, Daniel realized the truth. Miracles don't always happen in silence. They happen when someone believes in you enough to show you that you were never broken at all. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share with others. Subscribe now to Blax Stories for more powerful and emotional stories every week.